I'm gonna do some reading from this book. The reason I purchased this book a long while back is because of Dr. Jason J. Campbell's series on the Occupy Wall Street movement, where he does he does a lot of lectures that come from this book. This is Social Theory by Charles Lemmertz. This book is rich with good social theory. I'm serious. It has post-structuralism in it too. It has Derrida, Guattari, Deleuze, and Guattari in it. Judith Butler, Slavoj Žižek. And then at the beginning it has Karl Marx, Emil Durkheim, Max Weber. So this is going to be my first couple of videos on Marx, on not Bertolt Marx. I've done lots of videos on this guy, but I'm going to do videos on a couple things on Karl Marx, who is the founder of Marxism and socialism. He talked about a lower phase, communism, which is socialism, which is coming after an overthrow of capitalism, and then coming up to a higher phase of communism, where it's in full-fledged form. Now, a lot of this has a lot of stigma attached to it, especially in the middle 20th century, this fear of communism, after World War II. So there's lots of history in this. Marx and Friedrich Engels had a lot of influence. His friend Friedrich Engels is not as often heard about. He is heard about in philosophy, as well as political science, I'm sure, and political and social thought. But in common thought, common sayings, he's not really heard of much. So I'm gonna read and talk about some things from an excerpt called Estranged Labor. This is before he wrote Capital and before he wrote the Communist Manifesto with Engels. Estranged labor, alienated labor are one and the same thing. They're used interchangeably. This is just so interesting and rich to read. I've underlined a lot here. So I'm just going to kind of brief you a little bit on what's going on here. It's being talked about. It's being argued against capitalism. He doesn't talk about so much the bourgeoisie and the proletariat here as he does in Capital and the Communist Manifesto, where he talks about class struggles more. But you have the bourgeoisie and the proletarian. The bourgeoisie, they own all of the means of production, and they own all of the surplus. They own the workers, pretty much. When a worker who's so poor and has no choice but to work, the worker doesn't gain any of the product. The product goes to the bourgeoisie. The proletarian has no choice because he's poor, so he has to work. So basically, he's being alienated from the product that he works to make. So I'm gonna kind of go through. I've underlined some things as you've seen. So I'm gonna kind of read through this and kind of talk about stuff here. On the basis of political economy itself, in its own words, we have shown that the worker sinks to the level of a commodity. Commodity is a big word here. What is stated here is that as the worker is estranged or alienated from his product and stuff that he creates, the bourgeois basically make him a commodity. because he's basically not a worker, but he is labor, and he is a commodity. That the wretchedness of the worker is an inverse population to the power and magnitude of his production. That the necessary result of competition is the accumulation of capital in a few hands, and thus the restoration of monopoly in a more terrible form. Finally, the distinction between the capitalist and the land rentier, like that between tiller of the soil and the factory worker, disappears in that the whole of society must fall apart in the two classes, the property owners and the propertyless workers. The worker becomes all the poorer the more wealth he produces. The more his production increases in power and range. Labor produces not only commodities, it produces itself and the worker as a commodity, and does so in the proportion in which it produces commodities generally. This fact expresses merely that the object which labor produces, labor's product, confronts it as something alien, as a power independent of the producer. The product of labor is labor which has been congealed in an object which has become material. It is the objectification of labor. So, hopefully you're kind of seeing where this is going. This is just perfect. I love this. This is just nice, awesome writing. So, the bourgeois, bourgeoisie, they own all of the means to production, all the surplus value that is gained from all this product. They own all of that. They get all of it, and they pay the workers because the worker has no choice. He's poor, and that's a means for liveliness of the worker, but the worker is being alienated from the product it makes. So this is labor estrangement. He goes into more detail of what this does to this worker, and in my opinion, it's almost existentialist. It's almost like existentialist thought. I'm serious. It's that good. In the conditions dealt with by political economy, this realization of labor appears as loss of reality for the workers, objectification as loss of the object, and object bondage, appropriation as estrangement, as alienation. So much does labor's realization appear as loss of reality that the worker loses reality to the point of starving to death. So much does objectification appear as loss for the object that the worker is robbed of the objects most necessarily, not only for his life, but for his work. All these consequences are contained in the definition that the worker is related to the product of his labor as to an alien object. From this premise, it is clear that the more the worker spends himself, the more powerful the alien objective world becomes, which he creates over against himself. The poorer he himself, his inner world, becomes, the less belongs to him as his own. Okay, this gets a little more into religion. It makes me think of Feuerbach. He does critique Feuerbach. Feuerbach has a book called The Essence of Christianity, which kind of has some similar structure from Marx. Feuerbach's arguments against Christianity is the same structure that Marx uses. It is the same in religion. The more man puts into God, the less he retains in himself. I disagree with that, but it's awesome writing. The worker puts his life into the object, but now his life no longer belongs to him, but to the object. Hence, the greater this activity, the greater is the worker's lack of objects. Whatever the product of his labor is, he is not. Therefore, the greater his product, the less he is he himself. The alienation of the worker in his product means not only that his labor becomes an object, an external existence, but that it exists outside him, independently, as something alien to him, and that it becomes a power of its own confronting him. It means that the life which he has conferred on the object confronts him as something hostile and alien. Okay, so the worker is kind of made into a commodity as labor and product. The labor, which is the commodity of the worker. The worker is no longer a worker. He becomes commodity as labor, and labor essentially is product. Labor means product, and product, all that labor and product is owned by the bourgeois. So the more the labor, the proletarian puts into this object, the more he puts into it, the more he loses. The more he gets alienated from himself, as we will see here. Thus, the more the worker by his labor appropriates the external world, sensuous nature, the more he deprives himself of means of life in a double respect. First, thus in double respect, the worker becomes a slave of his object. First, in that he receives an object of labor, in that he receives work, and secondly, in that he receives means of subsistence. Therefore, it enables him to exist, first as a worker, and second as a physical subject. Political economy conceals the estrangement inherent in the nature of labor by not considering the direct relationship between the worker, labor, and production. It is true that labor produces the form for the rich, wonderful things. The worker, it produces privation. It produces palaces, but for the worker, hovels. It produces beauty, but for the worker, deformity. I love it. I love it. It replaces labor by machines, but some of the workers it throws back to a barbarous type of labor. The other workers it turns into machines. It produces intelligence, but for the worker, idiocy, cretinism. Okay, so then he brings in this idea of technology, how like the machines in the factories, it de-skills the worker, and it de-skills him, and makes him more into a object. The direct relationship of labor to its produce is the relationship of the worker to the object of his production. Till now, we have been considering the estrangement, the alienation of the worker, only in one aspect. But the estrangement is manifested not only in the result, but in the act of production within producing activity itself. How would the worker come to face the product of his activity as a stranger, were it not that in the very act of production he was estranging himself from himself? This is where it gets existentialist, like Sartre, Camus, de Beauvoir. Like he's becoming alienated from himself in this. That's existentialist thought, I think. What then constitutes the alienation of labor? First, the fact that the labor is external to the worker. It does not belong to his essential being. That in his work, therefore, he does not affirm himself, but denies himself. Does not feel content, but happy. Does not develop freely his physical and mental energy, but mortifies his body and ruins his mind. That's existentialism. The worker, therefore, feels himself outside his work. His labor is therefore not voluntary but coerced, but it is forced labor. It is merely a means to satisfy needs external to it. Okay, here's where it gets religion again. Just as in religion, the spontaneous activity of human imagination, of the human brain, and the human heart operates independently of the individual. This operates on him as an alien, divine, or diabolical activity. In the same way, the worker's activity is not his spontaneous activity. It belongs to another. It is the loss of his self. As a result, therefore, man no longer feels himself to be freely active in any but his animal functions. Eating, drinking, procreating, or at most his dwelling and in dressing up, etc. And in his human functions, he no longer feels himself to be anything but an animal. What is animal becomes human, and what is human becomes animal. Okay, like, is alienation from himself in this? Let's see here. The relation of the worker to the product of labor as an alien object exercising power over him. This relation is at the same time the relation to the sensuous external world, to the object of nature as an alien world, antagonistically opposed to him. The relation of labor to the act of production within the labor process. This relation is the relation of the worker to his own activity as an alien activity not belonging to him. Here we have self-estrangement, as we have had previously in the estrangement of the thing. Okay. We have formulated the concept of this fact, estranged, alienated labor. We have analyzed this concept, hence analyzing merely the fact of political economy. Okay, that's all I wanted to read. Anyway, this is just perfect, I think. First of all, we have in that we have, as I will talk about in a different video, classes, but we have one group which owns the surplus value and the means of production and all the ways to gain product. All of this, they own all of it. Okay, they own all of it. Okay, and that means, like, back in his day, back in from the time he was writing this, which I think was, I don't even know, into like the early 20th century, and towards like the later after that, there was factories and there was manufacturers, and all this stuff. He does talk about technology and how it de-skills the person. It makes them more into a object. Pretty much the worker in his labor becomes a commodity. And these bourgeois, they own all of it. So, and then you have these poor people over here. They're not like, they're just really, really poor. They don't have all they can do is really work to like get them up. All they have to do to pull themselves up by their bootstraps is to work, is to put all they have into this. And what Marx is saying is that they don't have what they produce. They put all of their might into this, and they don't have what they produce. The more they put into this, the more they lose of what they make, and furthermore of what they lose. And as they put more of themselves into this, they lose themselves because they don't own what they're making. So I really, I really like this, especially because it makes me think of existentialism. It does, um, because of how in this process of how, we have bourgeois over here, proletarian over here, and he keeps putting more of his life, his work into this, um, and he keeps losing it. He loses himself. He becomes animal. All he has left is his animal things. I mean, what is he left to do? So he keeps losing himself. And I think that I think that this is parallel to a lot of things that are in today's society. Even it was prevalent back then. I think maybe a little more, but I think it definitely is a lot. It definitely is a ton today. I think what we do in our work is very important. Um, the work that we do is a part of us. What we do as humans in our life is a huge part of us. You know, um, it is. Um, so I would love to make that into a perfect existentialist concept. I mean, perfectly. Um, just because it is. I think to lose yourself, I think, is definitely a part of that. Jean-Paul Sartre talks about losing yourself in bad faith and self-deception. That's a totally different thing. But that is a form of losing yourself, and that's what I think that Marx's thought is, in a sense, kind of existentialism. So, um, I think that this is very prevalent in today because people do jobs that they hate because they have to earn livelihood. They have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, so to speak. Um, so I think that this is a huge problem. I think a lot of it has to do with capitalism. Now, I'm not going to say that communism, I'm not going to say that full-fledged communism is the way to fix it, because it's not. We have seen in history how communism has failed. But I think capitalism is, in a sense, failing too. Because we have a bunch of people that own everything and have all the money, like the top 1%, as the Occupy Wall Street movement. They own all of it. And then we have all the rest of all. I don't know. I don't think it's one versus 99. That's a bad ratio. I'm saying that there's a group that owns the means of production and all the money, and they have the resources and all of it. And we have people over here who are poor, who have no choice but to work for their livelihood, and it's a bad it's a bad relation here, I think. So yeah, this is very interesting stuff. I'm gonna have one more video on Marx, which is about the class struggle and Marx's solution.